Hello, everyone, and welcome to Uncivil Law, where we learn through the misfortunes of others. As always, I hope you enjoyed this legal education content, and today is the day I earned that subscription. For today's story, we are talking about former South Carolina attorney Alex Murdaugh, whose trial is upcoming and one that we are certainly following here on Uncivil Law. Alex Murdaugh's family is a family of lawyers that have been dominant in low country South Carolina for at least the last 100 years. Alex Murdaugh, however, has gotten off to some bad times, mostly because he probably killed his wife and son. That's he's on trial for. Also, probably stole $8 million of money from the client, and I can't even remember how many times he's been indicted now. It's hard to keep track. Is it 15 or 16 indictments with 81 or 83 different felonies? I don't even know anymore. It's a lot of things. But Alex Murdaugh is facing some potential problems. Well, the state has come forward with their theory of the case of the murder. So we're going to read a little bit more about what the state thinks might have happened. A disgraced and disbarred former attorney who previously had worked for the same prosecutor's office that his great-grandfather, grandfather, and father were in charge of for nearly a century, I told you, he's a bit of an institution, killed his wife and youngest son because of fast approaching personal, legal, and financial ruin, according to the authorities in South Carolina. So this is their theory of what happened, right? His world was coming down. It was crumbling before him because of the financial frauds that we mentioned in the other 14 indictments, with the other 81 felonies, which are all honest service fraud and, unjust enrichment and wire fraud and computer fraud and all that stuff. And the reason these murders happened, according to the prosecutor, is because of this problem running out. So the prosecutors say that the Murdaugh, who was 54, was about to lose everything and everyone was about to find out, according to the December 8th theory of the motive that was filed by the South Carolina Attorney General's office. The Attorney General writes, the jury will need to understand the distinction between who Alex Murdaugh appeared to be to the outside world, a successful lawyer and scion of the most prominent family in the region, and how. That's one of the reasons this case is so interesting, because this is aristocratic. This is South Carolina Southern aristocratic. So this is some John Grisham shit that's happening over here. And who he was in the real life that only he fully knew. An allegedly crooked lawyer and drug user who borrowed and stole whatever he could to stay afloat, to stay one ahead from detection. And as is usually inevitable, eventually it caught up. Proof of years of Alex Murdaugh's unbroken series of misappropriation, lies, loans, debts, and thefts is necessary to explain this distinction to the jury. Only then can a jury understand the clouds the defendant's past were gathering into a perfect storm that was going to expose the real Alex Murdaugh to the world, which would mean facing real accountability for his life. So these pressures combined, and perhaps his family getting suspicious, perhaps led to the untimely death of his wife and child. Central to the prosecution's thesis is an alleged decade worth of financial crimes. That would be the other indictments I have talked about. In addition to 2 counts of murder in the first degree and associated weapons charges, Murdaugh also stands accused of a myriad of financial crimes, including insurance fraud, property fraud, money laundering, and computer fraud. Prosecutors have also alleged he stole millions in a fund that should have gone to the family of his late former housekeeper who died on his family estate, who he may have also killed. That detail is not presently clear, but there are some suspicions. The one-time trial lawyer defendant is additionally being sued in civil court by his former law firm for allegedly stealing untold sums of money from his client funds. Now, it's my understanding that the firm made the clients whole. So they were able to scrape together enough money to pay out all the clients. So it doesn't look like the clients are out of anything, thank God, but the firm is out $8 million. That's a lot of money. The filing from the prosecutor goes on to say that his schemes included billing personal expenses to his clients with law firm credit cards or accounts, that's a no-no, stealing directly from relatives and the Hampton law firm of his great-grandfather that had founded in 1910. This included one instance in which Murdaugh accepted a 6-figure loan repayment the firm meant to send to his older brother. surreptitiously stealing money from his own client's legal settlements by having his firm write out distribution checks to the state bank, and then having his accomplice convert those checks for personal use. So yeah, also he had a friend at the bank who was helping him in his schemes, who's also under indictment. Stealing client money through fraudulent personal accounts that Murdaugh created in 2015 to disguise to look like a financial firm. These alleged financial improprieties include one fraud allegation linked to when he was shot in the head. Now, what's interesting, I suppose, about that is the allegation here is that he hired someone to shoot him in the head for the purposes of insurance fraud. So the idea was that this person was going to kill him, and then his estate would get a huge check from his death, which would help to pay off things. But of course he didn't die, so the whole scheme didn't work. And so that's also something that's been happening there. In 2021, Murdaugh claimed to have found his wife and son shot dead in the family's property, which is a 1,700-acre hunting lounge. So killed on his own property in the middle of nowhere, which kind of reduces your suspect pool. Media attention poured over the circumstances of the slaying, as well as the family's substantial wealth and political party and power amassed over a century's worth of luring. The spate of national press also dredged up a local story, because in 2019, a boating accident killed Mallory Beach. Murdaugh's son was alleged to have used his older brother's ID to purchase alcohol and believed to have been piloting the vessel drunk. So his son, who is now dead, was facing 3 criminal charges from the incident. The Beach case was dodged by a narrative that his family somehow used his power to shape the contours of the law enforcement investigation. So his son was facing some time, and perhaps that also was part of Murdaugh's motive, because perhaps his son being convicted would have caused some of his schemes to become unraveled. So part of the motivation. Prosecutors made reference to the boating accident issue in the Thursday motion because Murdaugh himself allegedly had also made reference to the boating accident when suggesting why his wife and son were killed. So according to the filing, Murdaugh had suggested to law enforcement that the killer's motive stemmed from the February 2019 boat wreck, and expressed certainty and stated he knew the fatal crash was the killer's motive. So one of the reasons that the police think the tie might be connected is because Murdaugh himself suggested the tie. The prosecutor continues by saying this case is unique in South Carolina history for many reasons. One of those is exposing what happened to the wife and son necessarily has its root in corruption that began years ago and festered until this murder resulted. The evidence relating to this should be admitted so the jury can fairly assess why the man might have murdered his wife and son. Thus, that brings us to an update in the Alex Murdaugh situation, in which prosecutors have stated on the record their thoughts as to motive. They believe that this was because of Alex Murdaugh's own doing, that because of years of financial corruption, stealing from clients to take money from them and make it his own, and also relating to his son potentially killing a woman while boating drunk, that this all led eventually to the murder of his wife and son because his life was coming down before his eyes. So yeah, because his father and his grandfather and great-grandfather were all county prosecutors, as he was at one point, this case has its roots in some real Southern aristocratic stuff. So we will definitely be following this trial, and I plan to stream this trial when it occurs. So we will look forward to that, at least for the moment. That brings us to the end of discussion of this story.